I Was a Rat or The Scarlet Slippers by Phillip Pullman. Today we'll be reading chapters 2 to 5. If you would like to read chapter 1, please go back to my channel where you will find chapter 1 with the comprehension questions. At the end of this video, there will be comprehension questions that you can answer. Please make sure you pause the video and look back at the text to help you answer these questions. The Privy. Next morning, Joan found the little boy lying in a heap of torn sheets and a terrible tangle of blankets and feathers, fast asleep. She was going to cry out because she feared that something had come in at the window and attacked him in the night, but he was sleeping so peacefully among all the destruction that she couldn't bring herself to wake him, though she was in despair over the damage. "Come and look," she said to old Bob, and he stood open-mouthed in the doorway. "It looks like a hen run after a fox has been in," he said. There wasn't a sheet or a blanket that hadn't been torn into strips. The pillow was burst open and feathers lay like snow over the whole bed. Even Bob's old nightshirt lay in tattered strips around the thin little body on the mattress. "Oh, Roger," said Joan, "what have you done?" The boy must have learned his name because he woke up as soon as she said it and sat up cheerfully. "I'm hungry again," he said. "Look at what you've done," she said. "What were you thinking of?" He looked around proudly. "Yes, it was hard, but I done it," he said. "There's a lot more that needs chewing and tearing, and I'll do that for you later." "You shouldn't tear things up," she said. "I've got to sew them all together again. We don't live like that, tearing things to pieces. Dear, oh dear." The more she looked, the more damage she saw. It was going to take hours to repair. Bob said, "Did you do that because you was a rat?" "Yes," said Roger. "Ah, well, that explains it," the old man said, but Joan was in no mood to listen. "That's got nothing to do with it. Never mind what he was, it's what he is now that matters. You shouldn't tear things up like this," she cried. She took his thin little shoulders and shook him, not hard, but enough to startle him. "You come down with the kitchen with me," said Bob, "and I'll tell you a thing or two. But first, let's have some more manners. You've upset Joan, so you have to say sorry." "Sorry," said the boy. "I understand now. Sorry." "Come along," said Bob, and took him by the hand. He could see Roger fidgeting and guessed what he wanted to do and took him to the privy just in time. "Whenever you want to do that, you come in here," he said. "Yes, I will," said the boy. "That's a good idea. Now, come and have your breakfast. Wrap them pieces of nightshirt around you. You can't walk around naked. It ain't decent." Roger sat and watched Bob cut 2 slices of bread and prop them on the range to toast. "I'll cook you an egg," the old man said. "You like eggs?" "Oh, yes," said Roger. "Thank you. I like eggs a lot." Bob cracked it into the frying pan, and Roger's jaw dropped as he saw the whites spitting and bubbling and the golden yolk glistening in the middle. "Oh, that's pretty," he said. "I haven't seen the inside of an egg." "I thought you'd ate him before." "I ate him in the dark," Roger explained. "What, when you was a rat?" "Yes, me and my brothers and sisters, we ate him in the dark, yes." "All right then," said Bob peaceably, and slid the fried egg onto a plate and buttered the toast. Roger could barely hold himself back, but he remembered to say thank you before he put his face right down onto the plate and drew it back at once, gasping at the heat, his eyes brimming with tears, yellow yolk dripping off his mouth and nose. He turned to Bob in distress. "Oh, I forgot you don't know how boys eat eggs," the old man said. "You probably thought you was a rat still, I expect." "Yes," said Roger unsteadily, wiping at the mess with his fingers and licking them hard. "I couldn't see the spoon, so I used my face." "It's a spoon, not a spoon. For eggs, you got to use a knife and a fork. Here, do it like this. You copy me." Ignoring the tears and the egg on his face, Roger tried to do as Bob showed him. It was much harder to eat the egg with a fork than it had been to spoon up the bread and milk, but whenever he got discouraged, Bob told him to take a bite of toast. Roger held it up in both hands and chewed it swiftly with his front teeth. "I like toast," he said, "and egg." "Good. Now listen, we've got to find out where you come from and if there's someone who ought to be looking after you, because if you can't look after yourself, you're too little and you can't stay here because you don't belong to us, see? I want to stay here. I don't want to go anywhere." "Well, we've got to do what's right. There's clever folk in the city hall. They know what's right. We'll go along there by and by." "Yes, that's right," said Roger. The city hall. The office they needed was at the top of a grand staircase and along a panelled corridor. Bob and Joan had to hold the boy's hands because he kept making little twitching movements as if he wanted to run away. "Do you want the Privy again? Is that it?" said Bob, and Joan hushed him for using a rude word in an important place, but he said, "There's times when the Privy is the most important place." "No," said Roger, "I just want to see what the wood on the wall tastes like." "He's an odd one, all right," said Joan. But she looked down at him fondly all the same, and he did look smart with his brown hair brushed neatly and struck down with water, and his uniform washed and pressed, and his vivid black eyes gazing around. In the office where they deal with lost children, they had to sit down while a lady filled in a form. Bob was anxious to get things right. "Properly speaking, we ought to gone to the found children office because this is a found child, only there ain't one far as we can see," he told her. "So we come here instead." "You'd better tell me the details," said the lady. She took one of a dozen very sharp pencils out of a jar. Roger watched her hand move to the jar, but he didn't watch it go back to the paper. As soon as he saw the pencils, he fell in love with them. His whole heart longed for them. So while the lady and Bob and Joan leant towards the desk talking, Roger's hand crept off his lap and slowly, carefully over to the jar. He couldn't help it any more than a dog can help tiptoeing around the corner to eat the cat's food. Bob was puzzled by what the lady was saying, which was why he was leaning over the desk to peer at the form she was filling in. No, he said, "that can't be right. He's got to come from somewhere. Someone must be missing him." "I can assure you," she said, "our records are very thorough. There are no lost children in the city, not one boy or girl." "But what about found children?" "There's nothing we can do about found children. We deal with lost ones." "Gaw," said Bob, "I'm baffled." "Have you asked him where he comes from?" the lady said. And they all turned to Roger. He looked up, pleased to be noticed, but a little guilty too. The stump of the pencil was just sticking out of his mouth, and he quickly sucked it inside and pressed his lips together, but the lead had marked his mouth, and there was little flecks of red paint all around it too. Joan said, "Child, what have you been doing?" He tried to answer, but his mouth was full of pencil. The lady said that pencil was the property of the city council. "I shall have to ask you to pay for it." Bob paid up. It seemed a lot of money for a pencil. Roger could see he'd done something wrong, and as soon as he swallowed the last of it, he said, "Sorry." "That's all very well, but you don't mean it, you bad boy," said Joan. "That's the trouble." The little boy was bewildered. Did he have to do something else as well as say sorry? What did meaning it mean? He looked from one grown-up to another, but they were all talking again. "He must have said something," the lady said. "I'm trying to help you, though it's not my job to. I've shown you a lot of patience." Roger looked for the patience, but since he didn't know what they looked like, he supposed she meant the pencils. "He said it was a rat," Bob said. "Not now. I mean, he didn't say I am a rat. He said I was a rat. That's all he said." The lady looked at them all with distaste. "I've got plenty to do without listening to nonsense," she said. "Well," said Bob, "all right. We won't trouble you any more." And he got up, as massive as a hill beside the little boy. "All I can say," he went on, "is that you ain't been much help. Good day to you." And with Roger between them, the old couple walked out of the city hall. "Ain't I going to stay there?" said the boy. "No," said old Bob. "Is that because I'm a bad boy?" "You ain't a bad boy." "But Joan said I was." "She was muddled," said Bob, frowning. "And now I'm muddled too." The orphanage. Since it wasn't far away, they decided to go to the orphanage, just in case. But then they stood outside and looked at the broken windows and the cracked brickwork and the missing tiles on the roof and smelt the orphanage smell drifting out. Stale cigarette smoke, boiled cabbage and unwashed bodies were the better parts, and heard someone crying steady sobs of misery through an upstairs window. Bob and Joan looked at each other and shook their heads. They didn't need to speak. Holding Roger's hand, they turned and walked away. The police station. There was a blue light outside the police station and a stout sergeant on duty at the desk. Roger looked at everything, the poster about Colorado beetles, the pictures of wanted criminals, the notices about bicycle safety. Since he couldn't read, he liked the picture of the Colorado beetle best. It looked very tasty. "Well," said the duty sergeant, "we found this little boy last night," said Bob. "He don't know where he comes from. We thought we ought to bring him in." "I do know where I come from," said Roger. "I come from down under the market. There's a broken gutter behind the cheese stall, and we had a nest in there. I was a rat," he added to make it clearer for the policeman. The sergeant gave him a long, cold look. Did you know there's such an offence as wasting police time, he said. No, he's confused, said Bob, anxious to explain. That's all it is. He probably had a bang on the head. He'd forgotten his name and all. I know it now, though, said the boy. I'm Roger. Surname? Asked the sergeant. My surname, said Roger, then worked it out. My surname is Sir Roger, he declared, nodding firmly. That's who I am, all right. And we've been to the City Hall, Joan said, but they couldn't help, and you're the only place we could think of, said Bob. If he's had a bang on the head, said the sergeant, tapping a pencil on the desk, he ought to be took to the hospital. Ah, we didn't think of that, said Joan. Roger was watching the sergeant's hand. That's a nice patient, he said to him. Huh? That patient you got, you've been chewing the flat end. I like chewing the pointy end first. The sergeant gaped and then recovered his wits. Did you notice that, he said. When I said hospital, he said patient. That proves it. He's had a bang on the head. Either that or he's an escaped lunatic. But in any case, he ought to be at the hospital. We can't take him here. We haven't got the facilities for lunatics. And in any case, he ain't committed an offence. Yet, he added, glaring down at Roger. The hospital. No, said the receptionist. He's not one of ours. They were very busy. People with broken legs or saucepans stuck on their heads sat waiting to be dealt with. Doctors in white coats rushed about listening to heartbeats or taking temperatures. Nurses emptied bedpans or bandaged cuts and grazes. It was the best place Roger had been in yet. But he might have had a bang on the head, said Joan. Poor little boy, he thinks he was a rat. Said the receptionist and wrote rodent delusion on a pink slip of paper. You got a lot of patience, said Roger, looking with great interest at her desk. Got to be patient here, she said, and passed the slip to the nearest doctor. That puzzled Roger, but he soon forgot it. The doctor was an impatient-looking man with a smart black beard, and he said, "Follow me." So Bob and Joan took Roger into the consulting room and watched anxiously as the doctor examined him. First, he felt all around Roger's head. No cranial contusion, said the doctor. Roger was fascinated by the rubber tube the doctor had round his neck, and when the doctor put the two hooks on the end into his own ears and placed the other end against Roger's chest, he could hardly hold himself back. His mouth was watering so much he dribbled. Good appetite, the doctor said. Very good indeed, said Joan. In fact, good, said the doctor, twiddling Roger's knees. Joan thought she'd better keep quiet. The doctor examined Roger all over and seemed to find only a healthy little boy. So what's this rodent delusion? He said finally. Well, he says he was a rat, said Bob. He's convinced of it. A rat, were you? Said the doctor. When did you stop being a rat then? When I turned into a boy, said Roger. Yes, I see. When was that? Roger twisted his lips. He looked at Bob for guidance, but the old man couldn't help, and neither could Joan. Dunno, the boy said finally. And why did you stop being a rat? Dunno. Do you know what you are now? I'm a boy. That's right, and you're going to stay a boy, dear. Yes, said Roger, nodding seriously. No more of this nonsense. No, mustn't worry your... The doctor hesitated. He'd been about to say your parents, but he looked at Bob and Joan again and said, Granny and Grandpa. Joan sat up a bit sharply. Roger looked puzzled. Bob took Joan's hand. He's no worry to us, he said, as long as he's all right. He's perfectly all right, the doctor said, a normal, healthy little boy. But what should we do with him, Joan said. Send him to school, of course, said the doctor. Now, I'm busy. Run along. Good day to you. Now, that concludes our reading of chapters 2 to 5 of I Was a Rat by Phillip Pullman. I would like you to now answer the comprehension questions related to the last few chapters. Number 1. In the morning, how do Bob and Joan find Roger? Number 2. Where did they take Roger and how do each of these places react? Number 3. Find a moment when Joan is feeling uncomfortable. What word shows this? Number 4. Why does Roger keep telling everyone that they have patience? Number 5. Summarize the key events from chapters 2 to 5 in 5 sentences. Number 6. Predict what you think will happen next. What might happen to Roger in school? And number 7 is a creative writing task. I would like you to research and create a fact file all about rats. Now, if you do any of these activities, please don't forget to take a picture and upload it onto Instagram or on your TikTok and tag me in it, as I would love to watch what you have got up to. Bye bye.